Hello book lovers, and welcome back or welcome to Nat Cat's Bookish Cafe. Today I'm here to do the final wrap up of 2023 by going through the books I read in the second half of December. Guys, we are already a little ways into 2024. I feel like this video is coming out a little later than it usually does, but it really does kind of depend on when the month ends, and December ended on a Sunday and I don't film during the week, so obviously I had to wait until the next weekend to film that, but that is okay. Today we are going to go through the books that I read in the second half of December. If you would like to see what I read in the first half, I will go ahead and link that up above and down below as well. But before we get into the reviews for the 6 books I read in the second half of December, let's go over my basic monthly stats. In the month of December, I ended up reading a total of 11 books. I ended up reading a total of 2,949 pages, meaning that this was my highest page count for the year, which isn't surprising because I did do some challenges throughout this month to help me read more. That being said, I did vlog my experience for each individual week, so if you would like to check those out or even hear more about the individual books that I'm about to talk about, I will have all of those linked down below as well. Audiobook hours only came out to 21.33 hours. I definitely wasn't reading as many audiobooks this month. As for my ratings, star ratings, I had 1 5-star read, I had 3 4.5-star reads, I had 3 4-star reads, I had 3 3.5-star reads, I had 1 3-star read, and then I did have a 1 DNF in December that I did not rate. That brings my average monthly rating to a 4 stars, which was unfortunate because I was hoping that my annual average rating would be at least a 4-star, and it ended up being a 3.99. So very close, but didn't quite achieve that, but hopefully we get more 4.5 and 5-star reads here in 2024. Jumping right into the first book of this video, we have Redemption by Kenya Wright, and this was a book that I read on KU. It is a Christmas-ish romance. It is a romance that is kind of set around the Christmas time period. However, we are following Ebony, and she and her 3 children are on the run from her abusive husband. They've been on the run for about 3 years, and at the beginning of this book, he unfortunately finds them and they just barely are able to escape him again. Because they have to leave so suddenly, they end up getting stuck in a snowstorm and need to stay with Yoshiro. Yoshiro is a man who has been living alone for the last 5 years after his life in the mafia back in Chicago led to his wife and infant son being killed. Having never been able to save his son and wife, he takes it upon himself to save Ebony and her children from her abusive partner. This is a romance that I gave 3.5 stars. I have to admit, the weakest part of this romance for me was the actual romance. It definitely won me over towards the end, but it did take almost like 80% of the book before I felt really comfortable with the two of them being together. Ebony is obviously a woman who was in a very abusive relationship. Her husband hurt her and her children very much, so do check trigger warnings before jumping into this book. And I felt that while Yoshiro was very protective, it sometimes translated him into being possibly a little over aggressive with his feelings and not always listening to Ebony's feelings because he felt that he knew what was best to protect this family. And I can see the positive side of this. She definitely needed someone to protect her and her kids, but I was just wondering, in reality, how would a woman who has been in an abusive, controlling relationship feel about Yoshiro's behavior? But as far as the revenge plot line goes, as well as the kind of family dynamics, the kind of slight found family aspect that is in the story, those are all things that I really enjoyed. Up next, I finished the audiobook for Love Light Farms by B.K. Borison, and this is another Christmas romance. This one definitely a lot sweeter and fluffier than the previous one. In this book, we are following Stella, and she owns a Christmas tree farm that seems to be going through a period of bad luck. Some of her shipments seem to be not showing up, and some of the Christmas trees in certain areas of the farm are dying, and there's possibly a family of raccoons in her barn. They are facing some financial difficulties, and so in order to offer her and her employees some relief, she signs up for a influencer contest, meaning that an influencer would come to her farm and they would kind of film the area, talk a little bit about the farm, which will be awesome for advertisement for her farm, but also they can vote for that farm to be the best location featured, and they could win up to $100,000. However, when she's filling out the form, she ends up writing that she runs this Christmas tree farm with her boyfriend to add a bit of a romantic twist, which is not true. And so she asks her best friend of many years, Luca, to be her fake boyfriend. So this is obviously a friends to lovers situation. I think it's very obvious that the two like each other, and it seems very obvious that everyone else thinks that, because when they announced to their small town that they're dating, everyone's like, finally, it's finally happening. And so they never really have to prove to anyone that they're dating, because everyone just believes it, which I feel like takes a little bit away from that fake dating kind of scenario that a lot of people like. I did give this 3.5 stars. I will say the first half of this book really dragged. I think I was expecting that influencer competition to play more of a role, but really this book follows them as they kind of prepare for the influencer to show up, where they kind of are trying to get comfortable with the idea of being in a relationship and getting other people used to the idea that they're in a relationship. So when the influencer actually shows up, this is a totally normal situation that they can pretend has been going on for years. And so that part just kind of dragged for me, to be honest. However, I did think that the majority of the second half was a lot of fun. I thought that the sexy bits were actually pretty decently written, which based off the first half of the book I was not expecting at all. I will say what lowered the rating for this book a bit more was the third act breakup. It was so ridiculous, and it lasted maybe like 2 pages, and it was just Stella really just having these flashing signs right in front of her, and her just like, I can't see, nope, I'm in complete denial about reality at this point. And I was like, are you serious? So it was just a very frustrating experience to watch that third act breakup. Did not enjoy that whatsoever. I will also say that the kind of like mini vandalisms and crimes that are happening around the tree farm is very quickly solved. I wouldn't consider that really even barely a part of the story. So I just feel like this book definitely could have been fleshed out a bit more in certain areas of it. Next, we had another book that I got on KU, another Christmas book. I was reading a lot of Christmas books this year, which was nice, and that is Let Your Hearts Be Light by Faye Quinn. And this is a contemporary male-male romance between a grumpy dad and a sunshine dad. We are following Paxton and Baxter, and Paxton's son happens to have a crush on Baxter's daughter. And it seems that their school is putting on a sort of holiday buddy situation where they randomly draw 2 names, and those 2 people will have to do 3 holiday activities together, as well as go to the ski lodge together with their family. And Paxton's son asks his dad if he can rig it so that he gets set up with Baxter so that he can spend more time with Baxter's daughter. Obviously, as the 2 fathers start spending more time together, they end up falling for each other. If you're into the single dad trope, I think that you will really enjoy this book. I thought the relationship between the fathers and their kids, I will say Baxton is technically his daughter's uncle, but he's been raising her since she was 4 years old and his sister passed away. So he's definitely a father figure, but altogether the father vibes are really strong in this book. I really loved Paxton and his son, was it Nathan? They were so sweet together. I loved every moment of that. The romance I thought was really great outside of the smut. I have to admit, sometimes the smut was okay. It wasn't always bad, but there were definitely too many moments where I was like, did we have to get that descriptive? Because personally, I think we could have just skimmed over that part of it. So I think sometimes the smutty scenes took it a little too far for me personally, but otherwise I thought the relationship was really great. Both of our characters really grew a lot. Paxton was really a grump and didn't want to interact with a lot of people, but he definitely opened up a lot more as he got to know Baxter more. And Baxter was a sunshine guy. He was friends with everyone, but all his friendships were very surface level because he was kind of spreading himself a bit too thin. He was constantly trying to be the perfect father, and he was trying to be the perfect neighbor, and he was never putting himself first, and that included never really dealing with the grief of losing his sister so suddenly and having to take on the job of fatherhood for her daughter. So I think that there was a lot of great stuff in this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars and will definitely be checking out more work by this author. Next, we have a physical book, and that is The Ghost Bride by Young-Si Chu, and this is a historical paranormal slight fantasy story set in historical China in the 1890s. Yes, 1890s, and we are following Lilan, and she is the only daughter of a widowed man who, since the death of his wife, has just kind of locked himself away to study scrolls and poetry, and so their finances have been waning. One day, the very wealthy Lim family approaches him and asks if she is willing to marry their son who died 9 months ago, therefore making her a ghost bride. Her father does not agree to this situation. However, the Lim family approaches her again, and after giving the mother of the dead son a ribbon, this dead son is now able to pull Lilan into the ghost realm. In this book, we follow Lilan as she not only tries to reunite herself with the body she's been taken from, but also as she tries to do a favor for a shadowy figure who says that there is corruption happening on the plane between the afterlife and the living realm. While she is doing all this, she is falling for the new heir to the Lim household, who is actually the cousin of the ghost that is haunting her. So there is definitely a romantic plot line in here. I ended up giving this book 4.5 stars. I think I couldn't give it a full 5 stars just because it had a little bit of pacing issues, especially in the middle where I felt like we were dragging a little bit, but otherwise I just felt the story very enchanting, that I was really drawn into it and could just fall into the story and spend, you know, page after page with this character as she explored this new world. And I mentioned in my vlog that this definitely had some Studio Ghibli vibes in the form of like Spirited Away and Howl's Moving Castle. Her being in the spirit realm and just exploring that area was definitely giving some Spirited Away vibes, as well as a romance that was occurring throughout this book ended up giving major Howl's Moving Castle vibes. The ending of this book ended up making me tear up a little bit. It's one of those bittersweet endings, and I happen to love a bittersweet ending, and so this book definitely gave me what I wanted. Beautiful writing, an interesting, strong female character. I would say If you like Sophie from Howl's Moving Castle in the book, a little different than from the one in the movie, the Sophie in the book, then you will definitely like this character as well. I loved the magic and the myth that was featured in this story, as well as the mystery aspect that propelled the plot forward. So highly recommend this book. I will say at times it is a bit of a slower read, and then, you know, sometimes it picks it up. So I would say if you're in the mood for a historical that's very beautifully detailed and well written, as well as very romantic in certain aspects, then I would definitely suggest checking this one out. The last audiobook of the year ended up being A Merry Little Meet Cute by Julie Murphy and Sierra Simone, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. So I got one more 5-star by the end of the year. I was definitely worried that I wouldn't have any in December, but this book just won me over 100%. In this book, we are following Bee and Nolan. Bee is actually a porn star, and Nolan is a ex-boy band member who about 6 years ago had a pretty big sexual scandal that he's just never really recovered from. Bee is hoping to get a little bit more into acting because she understands that there is an expiration date for being popular within the porn industry. And when the owner of her porn company asks her to become the lead of this holiday movie that he is funding because their lead ended up getting injured, she jumps at the opportunity. Nolan, on the other hand, is facing some financial difficulties because his mother is suffering from a bipolar disorder, and he also has a younger sister who's still in high school that he is trying to support. Because of his sexual scandal, he just hasn't had the best opportunities to find jobs for himself despite his past popularity, and so when offered the opportunity to be the main male lead in this movie, he as well jumps on it. Bee is obviously very nervous about meeting Nolan, not just because she used to be one of his biggest fans, but because she is a plus-sized woman and is hoping that he will not react negatively to her replacing a not plus-sized main female lead who was previously supposed to be working with him. What she doesn't know is that Nolan subscribes to her channel and has for years and is a huge fan. And this is obviously a romance between two people who just can't stay away from each other. I have to say, I don't have too much to say on this book. It was just a good time. It was just a 5-star read. I enjoyed every moment of the story, had me smiling, had me laughing. The smut was amazing. I really enjoyed how sex positive this book was, how sex worker positive this book was, and the way that Nolan treated Bee and her desire to continue her work when it came to her uploading videos of herself to her personal channel, that he wasn't so insecure that he told her that she could no longer continue that line of work if they were together. So I thought that that was very mature of him, and I also really liked how confident Bee was in herself and in what she did. If you're looking for a really sweet yet smutty Christmas romance, I highly suggest checking this one out. I have read Sierra Simone in the past and really enjoyed her writing, and once again, I really enjoyed it in this book, and I will definitely be checking out some of Julie Murphy's books in the future. And on to the last book I read in 2023. Unfortunately, also the lowest rated book of the month, so we didn't exactly end on a high note, but I ended up reading Upgrade by Blake Crouch and only giving this 3 stars. In this book, we are following Logan, and his mother created some sort of gene mutation or alteration that was supposed to help prevent a certain type of rot, I think, in a certain plant, and it ended up, unfortunately, causing a worldwide famine after it mutated into something they could not control. His mother has since passed away, and he has spent some time in prison because of his involvement in that. And at this point, he is now working for an organization that is going after gene labs because people are no longer allowed to work with genes no matter what, not even if it's for any sort of medical treatments. And he is doing this kind of as penance for the part he played in what is known as the starvation. However, at the beginning of this book, there is an explosion within one of these gene labs that causes him to get contaminated. At first, it seems like nothing is wrong, and so the people of his organization say you're clean, you're good to go. However, he starts to realize that there are changes occurring within him. He's getting stronger, his memory is getting better, he's getting better at multitasking. He is evolving into a higher being. And it looks like someone wants every human to be this way. But as he becomes more evolved, he is finding it harder and harder to hold on to his humanity, to hold on to his compassion, onto his what we would consider human emotions. And so he's wondering if this is really what is best, if this should be the world's next steps. And so he is trying to prevent this. And that is what we are following in this book. I mean, the stakes are high. Things are crazy. I mean, if things go wrong, humanity as we know it will cease to exist. However, the whole time I was reading this book, it felt incredibly bland to me. I felt like the pacing wasn't as fast as what I'm used to with Blake Crouch books. I have read 2 of his other books, absolutely loved both of them. I love the high intensity of his stories, and I just did not feel this in this story. I also think I struggled to connect to our character a little bit. So when those emotional scenes came up, I was just not feeling it. And usually Blake Crouch has me in my feels. That was not the case in this book. So unfortunately, it was very disappointing to me. I also felt that there was way too much scientific jargon in this story, where there were so many times where I was just kind of like, I don't know what you're saying. You're just kind of confusing me with all these gene types that you're throwing at me. So unfortunately, this book just personally did not work for me, but I will definitely be checking out Blake Crouch again. Obviously, not every book that you read by an author, no matter how much you love them, is going to work out. And this one just ended up being a dud for me. All right, guys, so those are all the books that I read in the second half of December. It was a relatively good second half, despite, you know, the low rating of the last book that I read this year. But I would love to know how the last month of 2023 went for you guys. What was the last book that you finished, and was it higher than a 3-star? As always, thank you so much for supporting my channel by watching my videos, and I hope to see you next time. Bye!